So recording the computer, perfect. Let's share my screen. Okay, almost there. All right. Okay, and pass this off to Kelly. Oh, she's here. If not, me and Abraham can start it off. Let's see. Oh, Kelly's
Sorry,
here.
I was just muted.
Okay.
It's a common thing, man. Like people talk without realizing they're muted. I see it all the time and do it all the time. Well, just to start off by introducing ourselves, I know a lot of your faces are familiar to us if you've been here. We're so excited that you're continuing. And if you haven't been here until today, welcome. My name is Kelly. I am a librarian with San Mateo County Libraries. I also am a DJ in training at KFJC 89.7, the Wave of the West.
Very cool.
Yeah, and so that's sort of my connection here to the podcasting is some of my experience with radio broadcasting, but also into just, some of the equipment and starting to do my own recordings here at home. How about David? You want to talk a little bit real quick, introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'll definitely, and then I'll go to you, Abraham, next. So my name's David. Oh man, this podcast workshop series has been the highlight of my week the last couple of weeks. It's been so fun meeting with you all. I really want you all to think about how we keep the conversation going once our 4 weeks of podcasting ends. So think of some ideas. You have our email. We send out, weekly emails. Shoot us some ideas because we want to be able to let our supervisors know that there's interest, how we can keep the discussion going. Yesterday, so to just talk a little bit about myself, I love music recording. I've been recording the past, decade digitally with Pro Tools. Yesterday, before I had to do my homework and after work, I found myself to be a bit tense. So I laid down, I opened up Apple Podcasts on my iPad, and I listened to a nice 20-minute podcast to kind of refresh myself for a couple hours of homework, and it was immensely helpful. I'm going to pass this off to Abraham. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, David. So my name is Abraham, and I'm a library assistant for San Mateo County Libraries. I work at the Half Moon Bay branch, and my connection to like recording audio and all that stuff is I worked at Bali 92.3, which is a Bollywood radio station out here in San Jose, and I was also a radio DJ at San Jose State for KSJS 90.5. I did the overnight shift from 2 to 6 a.m. It was excellent, but it was only once a week, so it was all right. But I've always liked music and audio and all that, and I'm glad that all of you guys have come back to come and learn some more with us. I'm still new at podcasting, but I've been listening to podcasts for many, many years. So I'm glad that you are all here with us.
All right, and maybe you've heard it already, maybe you haven't, but it is Make It March. Today, March 16th. We actually have some additional workshops still. March has 31 days, right? I think, yes. So it's a nice long month for lots of making, such as making podcasts like you all. Actually, this Thursday, there is a special program with an artist, actually an illustrator. Wahab Al-Garmi is their name, and the program is called Draw It. So if you're interested in drawing, illustration, this Thursday, March 18th. I believe it's being promoted for like teens and up. So if you know anyone or if you yourself are interested, definitely check that out on our website. He's going to be doing this often intimidating topic of perspective as it relates to drawing. I can definitely relate to that. So they'll be doing like a group drawing together, going over some of the rules of getting your drawings to look just right. So if you're interested, we did have some free kits at some of our libraries, though I imagine those might have already been snatched up, but you can always reach out to our customer care or visit our website for more information about that.
All right, so this is part 3 of our program. Today we are going to be covering editing your podcast. And after this, we only have one more class left, actually, which will be not next week, but the week after, I believe, on March 30th. And that one will be distributing your podcast. So we'll learn about hosting and all those fun things that come with that. We have been recording all of these all of these classes. So if you need to go back and check in with them, if you haven't received the links, let us know and we'll get them to you. And I think David is next.
Thanks, Abraham. So today our structure, we are going to have an optional icebreaker share out. Podcast jukebox may or may not happen for the sake of time, but Kelly has a podcast jukebox queued up. And if we don't get to it this week, we will in 2 weeks. She has a really good podcast jukebox queued up. We'll have a nice learning portion today that centers on editing your podcast. We will then have a nice live podcast editing demo that I'll try to put together and showcase some of the steps I take when it comes to editing a podcast in a DAW. And Q&A. We'll finish with some Q&A. And we hope for lots of great questions. If you see questions, if you're seeing something in the question forms in your mind, jot it down or put it in the chat or say it aloud in Q&A. And we hope that we can answer your question to the best of our abilities. And I will pass this off to Kelly.
Yeah, so as those of you who have attended, we try to answer questions, especially when they come up, if they're like really relevant to what we're talking about. Other questions we might address later towards the end of the program. But feel free to add your questions throughout the program to the chat. I know I'm taking a look at that. Probably Abraham and David too. And then we'll definitely have some time at the end for any lingering last questions. And David just put in the chat, place your questions here. So feel free to use that function.
All right. And just as a quick reminder, or if you guys didn't know, next session on March 30th, we're going to have some special guests from pro podcasters, Jordan Blair from the Dreamful podcast and Crystal Profit from the Profit podcast. They're going to join us on the second half of that workshop to share out some of their experiences as podcasters and to answer some questions that you might have about podcasting itself. We're super grateful to have them on, and so make sure you bring as many questions as you can for that next class.
Yeah, they both have websites and you can find their podcasts. I definitely heard Jordan's on Spotify and I think Apple Podcasts. Crystal, just to share out a little bit about Crystal when it gets her. She has a really nice Facebook community for podcasters at any stage. So I joined just recently, and it's neat. There's like experts that are hoping to be podcasts. There's entry-level podcasters that are asking technical questions or philosophy style questions. So great podcast community that Crystal has on Facebook. All right, and just remember, if you have attended our last 2 workshops and you're here in this workshop, you do qualify for our microphone giveaway. You have to have attended at least 3 of our workshops. So if you're at 2 workshops right now or 1 workshop right now, attend this one today and the next one, and you will qualify for a microphone giveaway. We're giving away a blue Yeti USB microphone. It is sitting on my desk at the Belmont Library, and it looks fantastic. The color is black, so this one above is silver. The color is black, and we can't wait to notify the winner via email. So we hope you do attend all 3 so you can get a good chance at winning this microphone. All right, I'm going to pass it off to Abraham.
All right.
Oh, sorry. There we go.
That's okay. So we have a little icebreaker today. Last week we had a homework assignment for you guys, and we are going to take about a minute per person here. If anybody wants to volunteer, if you recorded a podcast episode, if you used a DAW, did you listen to a new podcast, or if you have a podcast that you'd like to share about, or if you want to just give us an update on a podcast that you've worked on during the last week. So do we have one more brave soul? All right, I think we can probably move on from here.
Abraham, I want to say one thing. I noticed from Grace, Ann, and Barb, they used the approach, use what you got at home. So great job using tools around your house. Excellent job.
But what was stunning is that it worked. I mean, if you knew the noise level I'm talking about, I've recorded it at 80 decibels, and these crazy headphones filtered it. I couldn't believe it. I was thrilled, actually.
All right. Yes. So yes, thank you everyone for sharing, Barb, Grace, Ann, even just things you tried. It's really awesome that you did that. And yeah, thank you for sharing. I know it's not always easy to share. So I think we will skip the jukebox for today. I know David's got a lot of great content to go over, but I'm gonna kind of kick us off here as we delve into putting all of these elements together in a DAW, right? Let's see, let me get to my notes here. So yeah, David in a little bit's going to be doing some live demonstration in a DAW. So I think that'll be really helpful for, especially if you haven't used one before. Hopefully that'll kind of help you ease into that. And then we'll also include some important considerations that go hand in hand with editing your podcast, like sound effects, music, and creating graphic art for your podcast. So to start, as you can see on the PowerPoint, we're going to talk about finding music for your podcast. Now, if you know anything about copyright or like whether or not you can actually use, popular songs for your podcast, typically the case is that you would have to like pay royalties or get some kind of license to use, I don't know, whoever just won the Grammys, Beyonce. Yeah, you might want to talk to Beyonce's people before you go and include her song in your podcast. But so kind of from a different approach, right, would be to actually make, thinking of like your jingle, right? You could probably experiment a little bit in a DAW such as GarageBand is really great for making your own music or maybe a little jingle. Oops, sorry, like shifting my screens here. Just want to make sure I get everything so I can see. There we go. So you can certainly also use, like if you have instruments such as like a shaker, you can use your voice, singing, you can use hand clapping, right? Or if you have music instruments that you play, such as ukulele, keyboard, or guitar, using your creativity, right, to kind of come up with your own jingle that could add a little music element to your podcast. A lot of DAWs also provide drum loops. So if you're not a percussionist, like I was in middle school, that's another option out there. Yeah, so what program would we be doing this in? So today, I think you're using Pro Tools first, or Pro Tools, David? Yeah, Pro Tools. But what I'm talking about right now is certainly most of the DAWs, either you can download, sort of like drum kits, other drum loops from the internet. There's also virtual instruments. I think I'm most familiar with GarageBand, and I know there's, virtual instruments like a keyboard that you can, play on your computer keyboard, come up with a melody. I know making it sound easier, but I know this is like not easy if you don't write music on the regular, but we'll get to that in a minute. If you have friends or family members, certainly, tapping your social network, you could ask somebody to help work on some music for your podcast. If they happen to be like a music artist or, that's kind of their thing and they want to get some promotion, right? That's another angle to consider, that they would get some promotion. I know there's podcasts I listen to where like, I think Hidden Brains one, where he always mentions who wrote the theme song. And I'm like, oh, that's nice that he mentions that, but I haven't actually like looked into that artist myself. There are also, there is options, right, where you could license royalty music from, David included this website, bensound.com is one of them. I'm sure there's a lot out there. Purple Planet Music is another one. There usually is music that kind of gives like certain moods. And I noticed David sharing the link there. So definitely I'm sure there's like an overwhelming amount of resources like this on the internet, where I'm guessing you would probably pay something. I don't know, David, if you know if those ones, yes, it sounds
like. Thank you, Kelly. I'll just step in for one sec. I reached out to Purple Planet Music to inquire because they have a licensing page. A lot of these like jingle websites have a licensing page that tells you with a free license, this is what you can do. With a standard license, this is what you can do. And with the ultimate license, you can do everything, But I reached out to Purple Planet and they responded to me mentioning that I could use with their free license, I could use the music in a podcast. I have to credit them in my podcast description. But for $8, I could use the music without giving credit. So I thought that was a really neat response from the Purple Planet team. But like Kelly mentioned, that's just one of the many websites where you can license music from. Thanks, Kelly.
Yeah, no, thank you for sharing your, and Abraham also is sharing in the chat. Looks like it's a Reddit thread of royalty-free music.
Yeah, there's a subreddit where they upload a ton of royalty-free music on there, and it's all sorts of genres, like stuff from jingles to like straight-up songs that you can find on there. There's some pretty good stuff.
Yeah, so if you are looking for something, those are a few places that you can look for. There's also websites that exist out there that where you can actually hire freelance musicians to actually, if like you wanted to have them help you come up with a theme song, you could certainly, I know paying artists is one avenue as well. I think this is you, David, right? You have a friend named Elemental Beats. Is that
true? Yeah. One of my buddies, we've been making music together for a few years, and he just messaged me 2 weeks ago, and he is now on Fiverr, which is a great music website to hire freelance musicians or graphic designers or whatnot. But he's on there, and I thought that's, it's definitely a viable avenue if you don't have anyone in your circle and you want an original jingle or original theme song to call your own for your podcast, to look into maybe hiring a freelance musician on a platform like Fiverr. Yeah. Thanks, Kelly.
Yeah, and I saw Grace was mentioned in the chat, like if her son plays the Amazing Grace song on the piano, is that legal? I'm not sure about Amazing Grace when I just realized the connection with your name there. So there definitely are songs that are within the public domain. I don't know if Amazing Grace is one of them, but anything that's in the public domain essentially would be free for you to experiment with. I can't remember if music and books are on the same, it's usually like 100 years after the person passes, I believe, or something like that. But I believe there are websites where you can look up, especially songs that are in the public domain if you wanted to have your son play something. You could also reach out to a local band, or if again, using your contacts or looking into local bands here in the Bay Area. You could, for example, listen to KFJC. Actually, that's a great place to find, especially less heard music and musicians. But there's also local recording studios. Those would be good places to reach out to. And then, you could also reach out to a local band, see if they're on social media or on their website. You can see if you can license a song or if they'll let you play their music for cross promotion. I actually was reading Podcasting for Dummies. I got my copyright here this morning, and they were talking a lot about just how much cross promotion can take place in a podcast, whether it's the music or the advertisements, or you're just bringing your friends on to talk about all the cool things they do. For licensing commercial songs, check out Harry Fox Agency's song file. I don't know, David, if you had a link for that, or is that a podcast?
No, that's there's a website called Harry Fox, and they license commercial songs like Kelly was mentioning, but there's a specific platform within that website that lets you license these commercial songs for generally how I've seen it in the past. And there's great YouTube videos on this. By no means am I an expert, but generally there's a certain amount of money you would pay for this license, and the license agreement would say for so many sales, if you're selling your podcast, a couple hundred sales, this is what it'll cost to license this particular commercial song. Now, if it's something like a podcast that is being distributed on a platform like Spotify that's up there indefinitely, there might be a different license that they sell for, digital streams. But Songfile, I would, if you're like, I got to have this Elvis Presley song as the theme song for my podcast, then check out Songfile. There's some great YouTube videos on how to use it. You could probably even call customer service at the Harry Fox agency, and they can walk you through how that works. But I know that's like one of the main staples for commercial music is licensing through that agency. Thank you, Kelly.
No, thank you. I think for me, this topic's like, my brain starts to like, what can I do? What can't we do? It's definitely not a simple issue for sure. And if that isn't evident, Amazing Grace is a public domain, but definitely certain versions that artists have put out, you want to be careful. If you were going to use, like, I don't know, maybe Beyonce has an Amazing Grace version that's like, she, doesn't want to let everybody use that one yet. But yeah, it sounds like having your son play the piano would be an option. David, do you want to talk a little bit about sound effects?
Yes, absolutely. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen briefly for this. Let's see, because I got to pull up my browser here. So there is a wonderful website. There's plenty of sound effects libraries online. I found a great sound effects library called zapsplat.com, and maybe Kelly or Abraham could throw this in the chat, zapsplat.com. But there are different levels of membership with Zapsplat. There's thousands of sounds you can choose from. I have the free basic membership that allows you to download MP3 sound effects. But what's so cool about Zapsplat is you can search by, maybe there's a sound in mind. Let's say you want body sounds, you want a fart, or you want a cough, or a burp, or a sneeze, or maybe you want an outdoor sound, birds chirping. You can do a search for what it is exactly you want. And there's also like a bunch of different categories you can choose from. So I could browse sounds by categories. Maybe there's an animal sound that I want, but I'm not entirely sure which one. So I'm just going to browse what animal sounds are available. I'm going to click on animals, and I could, search from birds or cattle. Can everyone see my screen? Hopefully you're all seeing the screen. Okay. Yeah. So Zapsplat, it's really fantastic. It's not the end all be all, but it's an easy one that I found that's pretty easy to use. And I've downloaded a few. Later on this week, we're going to be sending you some practice podcast audio files, and there's a few files from Zapsplat that are there. Now, Zapsplat does ask with a free basic account that you do credit them in your podcast description. So that will probably be exactly what you need to say underneath licensing. But I just thought, man, to have this kind of online library of sounds that you could throw in the background. Maybe your podcast is like about the zoo or something like that. You want it to sound like you were next to the big cats of the zoo or something like that. You can download one of these audio files and throw it behind the dialogue that's happening to kind of immerse the listener. So in the past, when I first started at San Mateo County Libraries, my manager at the time, she told me that I had a patron come in asking for sound effects CDs. And I go, do we have sound effects CDs? And we had like 5 or 6 of them at the Belmont Library. I'm not sure if we still do, but I thought it was so cool. We had like ocean sounds and environmental sounds and like a variety of sound effects packs that were really neat. So look out for sound effects because they could really enhance your podcast. I'm going to stop my share here, put up the power. Oh, actually, the PowerPoint's right here. Let's see if I can just jump back in. Thank you, Kelly, for letting me share.
Yes, of course. You're very welcome. All right. So moving on to another topic, but definitely related here, of thinking about advertisement opportunities. So this can be, you can add these to plug other avenues you have. So you can, in some ways, right, be cross-promoting your own work, whether you have social media handles and want to, say, hey, follow me on whatever, Instagram, Facebook, or if you have like a YouTube component as well to your podcast, linking to that or telling folks to visit those pages. You can also plug other people's podcasts or other creative endeavors. You can include practical news you've learned. For example, did you know that Grocery Outlet has great deals on Dr. Bronner's soap? So sometimes you can even sneak them in there without anyone realizing. Although I think that one was kind of obvious. If you think an advertisement will be fitting, you can, so if you have something like, oh, this would be the perfect thing to include, in my podcast, you can reach out to businesses or, whoever it is that you're thinking of wanting to include. You can also see if they might be willing to collaborate, right? And help you to record an advertisement for your podcast. And you want to think, how will you record? I'm sorry, let's see. Oh, yes, and like how would you go about recording that? Would it be, at home, over Zoom? Sort of what we touched on, I think, earlier in the previous workshops about just thinking, how are you gonna, actually bring those two voices together? So just a little bit about advertising. Definitely this Podcasting for Dummies book goes into a lot of these topics in great detail, and I'm sure on the internet there's lots more to explore there. And actually, this might be a good question to ask our special guests coming up on the final workshop. So that's all I've got about advertising for now. With that, I think we're going to go on to graphic art considerations with Abraham.
All right, so we are going to use one of my I don't know if I'd say it's my favorite, but I like it a lot. It's a pretty cool website. It's called Canva. I don't know if you guys have heard of Canva, but it's this free website that lets you make all sorts of pretty cool graphic designs for pretty much anything. So let me just share my screen here really quickly, and I'll show you guys how that works.
Abraham, what are you using it for?
We're going to quickly make a little mock-up for a podcast that David's going to play for you guys in a second.
Like a cover?
Yeah, like a cover, basically.
Thank you.
Okay, so can you guys see this? All right, so this is the front page to Canva. So it's pretty simple, except all this stuff is hiding everything. Give me a second while I hide this. There we go. Okay. It's pretty easy. You just go on here and do a little sign up. It'll let you sign in it'll let you create an account using Google or Facebook, or you can sign up using an email account. But let me show you guys a little demo of like how to create something. So during this week, we were looking to make a little podcast of our own. And, oops, sorry. And we decided to make one about cleaning. So let me share with you guys this other screen. Okay, and this has the notes so you guys can see that we have notes. All right, so this website will let you create basically anything that you need in terms of design. And so for this little exercise, we're going to make a cover art for our podcast. So the first thing that I would do is just search for podcast, because they have just podcast covers that are perfectly square and in high resolution. And you can take any of these and use them to create your own art. All the individual pieces inside of these pictures, you can edit them. So it makes it so that you can mess around with the art as you need it for your podcast. So we're going to use this 2 thumbs up art cover, and we're going to actually change it around a little bit. So we're going to search in our templates. We're going to look for cleaning because our podcast is about cleaning. And David, can you remind me what the podcast title was?
Gosh. Yes, I got it. A clean house is a happy house.
All right. So you can actually go in and just edit straight into the art. Thank you for reminding me. A clean house is a happy house. So clean house is a happy house. And as you all can see, that is gigantic, and it's a little hard to read it in there, but this does let you edit it. So you can make it a little bit smaller and drag it where you need it. Oops, let's get this here, get this up here. And it also has guidelines, which I really like. It's a little bit crooked. I think that looks pretty good. So we'll just leave it as that. And let's say we're not too crazy about these thumbs. So let's look here for some cleaning stuff. Oh, sorry, wrong one. On the left-hand side, they have elements and photos and other things that you can add onto here. So I was actually searching in the wrong place. I wanted to look in elements. So we're going to look for cleaning. And now they have a bunch of different little, I don't know what you could even call these. These little icons or elements that you can use to replace stuff that's inside of this picture. So let's delete one of these thumbs. We're going to drop in this person spraying some sort of solution. And let's say I don't want this other thumb either. And we're going to have this, we're going to have this person cleaning the heart. So now we have this, and then we're going to change this bottom part to a clean podcast about cleaning. And then since that's a little big, we're going to make it smaller. Yeah, and there's that. So now we have our cover art for our imaginary podcast, or well, not so imaginary because we actually did record this. And if we wanted to use this for whatever, there's a little download button up here, and it gives you options for different types of formats that you can download it in. PNG, I think, is probably the best format for something like this because it's a nice high quality image, and it doesn't degrade when you download it. So I would use that one, and that's pretty much it. It's a pretty simple little walkthrough of how to create some art for our podcast. So I've stopped sharing my screen. What's the next bit?
Abraham, I have to say your clip art that you chose in Canva definitely represents what you and Kelly were both talking about in the podcast, which
Yeah,
y'all get to hear in a second. Very cool.
All right. David, do you have a slide to show?
Oh, yes. Let me put it up. Thank you. Okay.
Right,
sorry.
so as you guys saw, it's pretty simple to create stuff, and really it just takes like a few minutes to mess around on the website and create a little art for whatever. I use that website to make the meals calendar because we serve meals at Half Moon Bay. So I just do like the weekly meals on there, and it makes a nice little calendar for our patrons to look at what's coming up during the week. And you can really make whatever you want on there. It's a really nice and very robust website, and it's free, which is awesome. All right, so so there's websites like Unsplash that provide royalty high quality photos that you can get for free from their website, and they're easy to download, and they have all sorts of pretty cool stock art on there. Another way to get art is to hire a freelance graphic design artist. We can use the Fiverr website, as we mentioned earlier, for getting somebody to make music for you. You can also get them to make art. They can do all sorts of really great things on Fiverr. Yeah, and that's what I've got for you guys about graphic design. So I'm going to turn it over to David next.
Thanks, Abraham. And just remember this, you could kind of take this step and execute whenever you want. That could be, way before you even write content for your podcast. Sometimes you might just need to have that graphic art in front of you to really get inspired. You could do this at the very end after you recorded all 12 of your episodes for your first podcast season. But you will want this when it comes to distributing your podcast, which we'll get into for March 30th's episode or workshop. So great job, Abraham. Okay, so 3 important steps for podcast creation. I really learned about these steps in terms of music, but there's a journey that this audio is going to go on when it comes to creating a song or a podcast or a voiceover or a film score. The first one is recording. So it sounds like at least Barb and Grace Ann, I'm sure a lot of you have worked on recording since we met last week. Maybe you found a place in your house, but basically in recording, you want to capture the best vocal performance or the best musical performance. Whatever you're working on, you want to be happy with the take that you record. So sometimes this doesn't just come in one take. Sometimes it takes multiple takes to get there. But you, as with your creative tastes, will have to determine as the podcaster, is this the best take you can create? I think it's very easy to get into this kind of paralysis where you're just not happy, so you continue and continue and continue, but you might end up wasting your time. So be realistic. With the time I have set aside, maybe you gave yourself a goal of in 3 hours, that's all I'm going to set to recording all my dialogue. Are you happy with the take you did? So think about that, capturing the best performance for recording. Let's talk about mixing. So mixing, and this is if you're recording into a DAW, right? So you have your recording, you either imported it into a DAW or you recorded straight into a DAW. The next thing is mixing. Taking the performance and preparing it for consumption. This will happen in the DAW. Steps can include recording unwanted background noise. Now for Barb's landscaping podcast, she probably wants all the background noise to be there. But if your podcast was about something else, maybe it was like grocery shopping or working out at home, and you have this, annoying leaf blower in the background, you might want to see if you can hold off for 15 minutes so the gardener can finish and then kind of resume a recording. Or in post-production, can you edit that out? Is there chunks of silence that you can remove in your DAW to take out the unwanted things? A cough, a sneeze, a bird chirp, a dog bark, whatever noises are happening around the house. If you don't want those to be there, that's something you'll do in mixing. You'll start to get familiar with the digital tools. In a DAW, you get a variety of digital tools that you can use to enhance the audio. One that comes to mind is an equalizer. The equalizer will allow you to take a vocal and increase the treble or increase the bass to taste, right? Maybe you're like, hey, this recording is really good, but since I recorded in the corner of my room, I'm getting a lot of boxiness or low end. I need to make up for that by adding some treble to the vocal. You'd use the digital equalizer in your DAW to enhance that, or to taste, right? There's another tool that comes to mind that's called the compressor. I'll show you a compressor today. I won't have a lot of time to talk about it, but basically what a compressor does is singing or speech is very dynamic, right? There's hills and valleys in your speech. There's different cadences and inflections that you have. And with a very dynamic vocal where the person's going up and down, that could be distasteful to some. And one way to kind of mitigate the dynamic performance is to use a compressor, which squashes the very dynamic peaks of the vocal, kind of brings it down lower to where the quiet parts are. And you get a more even vocal take. So it doesn't have to be extreme compression. You can kind of have a nice balance where there still are some dynamics, but you're not getting these loud, abrupt sounds. You're kind of evening out the sound to sound a little more professional. Compressor is great for that. DAWs are also great for special effects tools. So you may have a tool for one tool that comes to mind is the delay tool. It allows you to add echoes to the voice. So if you wanted to make it sound like you were standing on top of a mountain and you were yelling Geronimo or whatever it may be, you could add an echo to the background. So great free tools in the DAW. Another one is called Reverb, and it makes it sound like you're in a big space, right? Maybe you're in a cathedral, maybe you're in a hall, maybe you're in a cave. The free digital reverbs are just spectacular in DAWs. And Pro Tools First gives you a lot of these tools for free. Audacity does, GarageBand does. I haven't used Ableton or the PreSonus free DAW, but you're going to have a lot of them in general have tools to apply these different effects. So you'll be adding these effects tastefully throughout the podcast while you're mixing to bring to life the visions that you're having in your mind for this podcast. Another thing to think of, what's great with DAWs is automation. So if you're including songs, maybe you have an intro song and an outro song, you generally will want to kind of have a fade in or fade out of the song. So maybe the song starts out loud, right? You're playing the latest, greatest Katy Perry song, Baby I'm a Firework or whatever it is. And as the dialogue starts to come in, you want to fade that song out. Well, there's a great fade tool or automation tool that lets you turn that volume of the song down gradually. So when you're ready to start talking, the audience can hear what you're saying. DAWs are so great for automation. You could take sound effects and automate them to go to the left or to the right of the headphones or the stereo field. So a lot to think about with mixing. A lot's going to come with time. Do not fear mixing because this is a great place for you to learn. And there's great YouTube tutorials on mixing. So whatever DAW you're using, Ableton, Pro Tools, Audacity, GarageBand, look at on YouTube a tutorial video for mixing in that DAW. You'll get a lot of ideas and you'll be able to reference that in real time. The last step is called mastering. Now, mastering basically puts the final touches on your mix before it's distributed and ready for the world to hear. A lot of times a mastering engineer or some of the mastering plugins or the mastering AI options will take your song or podcast and try to maximize that output volume-wise. So you're competing with other podcasts. In mixing, you might be mixing and your overall volume is kind of low compared to podcasts you listen to, like Song Exploder, whatever it may be. The mastering engineer will work on making that sound as loud as possible. They'll also implement tools like equalization and compression and much more to put the final touches on mastering. I've worked with a local mastering engineer for music in the Bay Area out in South San Francisco. He's absolutely fantastic. His name is Justin Weiss, and he has a studio called Trackworks Studio. He's fantastic. There is so many great AI-based mastering options today. Websites like SoundCloud, Lander, and I have one more for you. Oh gosh, it's in my notes. Emaster.com. We'll try to put some of those in the chat for you. But for a minimal fee, maybe under $10, I think SoundCloud's is $3 or $6. You can upload your mix of your podcast, and it will use an algorithm to master your song. So very cost effective. And it's a good way to think about mastering. It's not mastering is not necessary, but it definitely can improve the sound. So I would say, of these three, you definitely want to start focusing on recording. You definitely want to start focusing on mixing and really polishing up from the bottom up your podcast, and then mastering will come last. But mastering can greatly improve. It can take a good podcast or a good song and almost get it to great because you're really considering the commercial market and how your podcast is matching up with commercial podcasts. So something to think about. I'm going to pass it off to Abraham, and then we'll get into our live demo. Thank you all.
All right, so we are going to brainstorm a little bit about podcast editing inside a DAW. And I just want to go back really quickly to the mastering portion and also the mixing and recording, just really fast, because I see some questions in the comments of people a little bit concerned about maybe feeling a little overwhelmed with the mixing and recording and all of that. I'd say just focus on creating the content first, and all of this recording and mixing and mastering, it'll all come later on. The first thing that you have to worry about is actually wanting to create the podcast and the content for the podcast. So if you feel that the mastering and mixing and all that seems like it's a lot, just don't worry too much about it. It'll come later on.
Abraham, I want to add one thing too, real quick.
Yeah.
You can always hire on mix engineers and mastering engineers. It doesn't have to necessarily be yourself. You might even find a way to barter with some. You meet some in a Facebook community or maybe from people here, and you find out, Grace Ann really has this strong suit for engineering, and maybe Barb has this great strong suit for podcast development. You can find ways to leverage your talents to work with other people to kind of do this. But yeah, don't be afraid of it. Just know there's plenty of great YouTube tutorials and lynda.com tutorials. I'm going to step off. I'll be right back off in 1 sec.
Yes, thanks for adding that, David. Okay, so we are going to brainstorm how to edit a podcast inside of a DAW. An important thing to note is that when we're brainstorming our approach to editing, is we'll start thinking of things like, what are you hearing in your head when you listen to the recordings that you made? Do you envision sound effects that can enhance certain messages, like maybe a reverb, or like David said, like sometimes you can add like an echo effect inside of the DAW to make it sound like you're in like a really big cathedral or something. Those might be effects that you want to add in there, or maybe like a zoom, pop, or bang, or whatever that you feel might enhance whatever the podcast is that you're creating. So those are things that you want to start brainstorming about when you're creating the podcast. Another thing that, so like you could also add maybe like an echo to a word if you wanted to, like, I don't know, add a little bit of salt to it or pizzazz, really. And of course, like all these things are just subjective. So you're creating this piece of art because that's what it is, really. And there's no right or wrong way of doing something. Something might have a better production value if you get it mixed and mastered and you add all these fun effects and stuff. But the most important part is to have good content. So with all these things in mind, let's say that you do your podcast recording inside of a DAW like GarageBand and stuff like that. Let's look at these following next points. So you'll want to make sure that you have all of your episode audio files stored in a place like that's not your DAW. So you can have it on your flash drive or on a Google Drive. I like the idea of having your files on a cloud solution because it's easier to access it from wherever you have an internet connection. Plus, it's less likely that you'll lose the things because they're on the cloud, but it is reliant on you having an internet connection. You should also import all the audio files to your DAW that are needed when you're ready. So you'll add the files to your DAW, and these can be all the files that you're going to need. So the things that you recorded yourself, plus the sound effects, background music, all the things that you're going to dump onto there. When you're in the DAW, make sure that you name all the tracks. I know sometimes I'm guilty of it too. I'll leave something like with the date, or if I recorded something on the voice memos app, it tends to the default naming scheme is, I think, that your geolocation. So a lot of times I'll have tracks that's just my address, and that's not very useful. So you should go in and rename that stuff. You can use, for example, to rename the individual files as intro, welcome, advertisement, interview, sound effects, music guests, and whatever else you might need for that. You could also use a different naming convention for your audio files. It doesn't have to be specifically like what we just said right here. When you're recording, when you're adding this stuff to the DAW, make sure you're watching the audio levels. Gain staging is of most importance there. So it's just a fancy term of lowering the volume of each track so the volume of the recording doesn't clip or distort the overall sound. Generally, that's represented as like a little meter. If it starts going into the red, that usually means that it's clipping. And you don't want that because it gives like nasty artifacting sounds, and that's not great. The DAW will have output meters that show how loud your overall volume is. And you don't want your output to you don't want the output of your signal to pass the 0 decibels full scale threshold when this is when you clip your converters and you get nasty sound artifacts, so like what I was saying right now. Imagine that audio editing tools you might need for your recording. So in DAW land, these are called plugins. So you'll start to hear the term plugins more as you get involved with more recording and mixing of your podcast. And it's a broad name for multi-purpose software tools that you can use inside of your DAW. So these are things like your limiter and stuff like that you can add to make your sound nicer. So is your audio recording sounding dull? Is another thing to think about. And you might want to consider adding an equalizer to add a little bit of treble, or maybe a bit of bass, or tone down the bass. Sometimes the microphones tend to add or take away bass or treble from the people's voices, so that's something to think about. Is the audio recording very dynamic in that there's too much rising and falling of the vocal? So you could consider using a compressor to try to tame the dynamics a bit. So that would be bringing in the compressor that is either part of the DAW, or you can get one yourself through a third party, and that's a whole separate thing. Another thing to think about is, are you looking for special effects to your audio? So maybe you want to make it sound like you're talking through a telephone, and you could bring in an equalizer plugin that can do something like that, that can make your audio sound like you're making a phone call, or that you're talking through a phone. Maybe you want it to sound like you're in a cave or in a cathedral, so you could use a reverb effect to make it sound nice and echoey, if that's what you're trying to go for. Maybe you want to add an echo to a specific word that you're saying to give it emphasis inside of the podcast, so you could add an echo effect, or sorry, a delay effect. And lastly, you might think that the volume of the podcast needs to improve, so it might be too low or maybe too loud. And you can use a limiter plugin to try to adapt that. So yeah. All right. Is that me for the DAW demo?
I got it.
All right.
Yep. Okay, so everyone, Abraham, great explanation. So in a short amount of time, I'm going to try to show you how I would go about mixing a podcast. So I will open up Pro Tools. I'll share my screen. I have the final mix version in a session. So Kelly or Abraham, maybe you could be my eyes on the clock for about 10 or 15 minutes, and I will try to import the tracks. And I may not talk that much about what I'm doing, but you can kind of see what I'm doing. I'll do my best to talk and let you know what I'm doing. But after 10 or 15 minutes, I might just go to the mixed podcast to show you kind of the effects I use and things like that. So let's go ahead and start sharing my screen, and we'll get started. Okay, so hopefully everyone can see my desktop. Pro Tools is down here at the bottom. So I am going to create a new session in Pro Tools. I'm going to call this Clean House is a Happy House, just all abbreviated podcast. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to set my file type to WAV. That's a high quality audio file. My bit depth to 24-bit. I'm using 48 kilohertz sample rate because I'm using Zoom audio so you can listen. And then I'm going to select stereo mix for in and out settings. And the location where this folder is going to save is on the desktop. So if I ever want to edit the session again, go to sleep, it will be saved on my desktop. Then I'm going to hit create. Okay, so as soon as Pro Tools opens, I have my mix window open. And this area, this window called tracks, is where I'm going to drop all my tracks in. I just want to do one thing real quick. I want to make sure I'm showing computer sound. So let me stop sharing my screen just for a sec. Share. Oops. Yes, I am sharing computer sound. Okay. All right. So I have a nice folder here that I called podcast audio for installment 3, tonight's workshop. Now, all of these audio files are going to be emailed to you in the next, 24 to 48 hours. We'll also try to drop a chat download link for all these files so you can start dropping them into your DAWs tonight. But I've labeled the files as such: music files. Those are all the songs I'm going to be using. SFX or sound effects. So I have sound effects for different parts of the podcast, like a drum roll, scrubbing, like we're cleaning something with maybe a sponge or whatnot. I also have the various dialogue parts. I'm calling them the ad, the call to action, interview parts, intro, and the welcome spot. And in the files we're emailing you, you'll also have the podcast mix that I made, so you can kind of reference. So to drag all these files into Pro Tools, I'm just going to drag and drop them into the tracks area. And it looks like I got 13 files here. And we'll let that load up. And Pro Tools is loading in the tracks, which is very nice. You'll know they're completely loaded when all these colors kind of come through. So the first thing I want to do is I want to make sure my sound is loud enough and y'all can hear my sound. So I'm going to open up a limiter plugin just to boost up the output of the sound that you're hearing. So I'm going to use this limiter plugin. I'm going to increase the threshold. If you're wearing headphones, you may want to take them off slightly off your head, just so you can. I don't want to blast your ears or anything like that. And we'll just try out one piece of audio. Okay, so I'm going to play this welcome audio down here at the bottom, and let me know with a thumbs up if you can hear the audio. Here we go.
Welcome to the podcast. A clean house is a happy house.
Okay, now for some reason my audio is playing really deep. It's like pitched to a different level, so there could be some issues with this audio, but I will open up something else and hope that that will fix it. But let's just pretend this audio is intact in the way I want it to sound. So what I'll start doing is in Pro Tools, I will start coloring my tracks to make it easy for me to find things. So each one of these horizontal rows are called channels. I can color my channels different colors. So for all my sound effects, let's say I want to color them orange. I could double click on this blue panel here. It opens up my color palette. And I can make every single sound effect, let's see, orange, and the waveforms, their corresponding waveforms, orange. So when I zoom in, all the waveforms you're seeing here, these are all different sound effects. Let's solo one. So that is the scrubbing with the sponge. Now, and I have another sound effect up here. So I'll go ahead and make that orange. Now, all my dialogue, like the ad, call to action, interview, all that, I'm going to make, let's just say I want to make it green. Okay, make everything green. Okay, and I'll zoom out just a little bit. And then all the songs I have, I can tell they're songs because they're stereo audio files. There's two different waveforms. A lot of the audio we recorded is mono, meaning it's just one audio form you're seeing in the file. So all the songs I will make purple. Okay. And then here's my welcome spot, which is the audio. So let's go ahead and make that green and green. Okay, so what I want to do now is I want to start, you'll notice some of the different waveforms are very tall, some of them are very small. So this is where gain staging comes in handy. I'll bring the volume down. So this very tall one right here is Abraham's audio. So I'm going to start bringing the volume down. I have a volume knob right here that lets me bring down the output of what's going on. I also have a volume knob here that lets me do it on the clip itself. So let's play Abraham. And Abraham, if the pitch is off, I'm sorry. I'll have it corrected when we show the final product.
Hello everyone, my name is Abraham, and today I am going to talk about one of my favorite cleaning.
Okay, so let's pretend that was the actual recording, the way we want it to sound. So now what I'll do is I'll start structuring my podcast, basically moving these waveforms around to develop a sequence. The intro starts, then the music comes in, then the advertisement comes in. I'll start doing that on this timeline here in Pro Tools. So at the top here, I have this grabber tool. It looks like a hand, but it basically lets me move these files around. So I'm going to start off with the intro. which is up here. So my intro I want right in the very beginning. Now, one thing you'll do in the DAW is notice there's this nice gap of silence right here in the beginning. I'll listen to that to see if there's any coughing or clicks or pops from me hitting the keyboard when I was recording. Let's see how that sounds. So I can hear like maybe I bumped a pencil or something like that. So with the other tool, the selector tool, which is up here, I can highlight what I don't want and then just push delete on my keyboard and it deletes that. Then I can grab my hand tool and move this to the very beginning. So we'll zoom out. So after my intro, let's say I want to have some background music, and I do want to check one more thing. Okay, good, we're set for Zoom audio. So let's say the next thing I want is maybe my intro music coming in. So I have intro music from my friend Elemental Beats. He let us use one of his songs for the podcast. And let's see if we can take a listen to it, and I'll bring the volume down on that too. Oh, that's not it. That is the sound effect. Let's look at my coloring scheme. Songs are down here. Here we go. Okay, purple are songs. Let's solo that. I'm clicking S for solo so we can listen to this by itself. Okay, so that's my song. So basically, I'm going to move, and I could just click on the tracks and drag them wherever I want. I'm going to move the start of the song to the end of my intro. Because at the end of my intro, I say to myself that we will be listening to a song. So let's see if you can hear that.
Here's some music from Elemental Beats.
Okay, so I'll try to line this up to come in right after I say, here's some music from Elemental Beats. And let's listen to those both together.
Here's some music from Elemental Beats.
Now, one thing I notice is the volume is still pretty loud on the song. So I will drop the volume of the song down with this fader here to try to kind of even it out.
Elemental Beats.
Okay, so from there, maybe I only want like, I don't know, 20 seconds of the song to play. At the very top here, I have my timeline in the DAW, where I'm at. I'm 26 seconds into the podcast. So let's say I only want, 15, 20 seconds of the podcast. Can get my selector tool, come up right here. If I go to my edit window, I have an option for separate clip. And that splits it so I can delete the other side of the clip. So now with my hand tool, click and delete. And then I have my song in place. And if I want to add a fade, I have a fade tool, the corner of the clip that lets me fade out the audio. Nice and simple. So it just fades out. And after the song, I can go into my welcome spot. Well, I'll take the welcome clip, slide it over. And where the waveform starts, right here in the clip, I'm going to put near the tail end of the song as it's fading out. And all this silence that's happening in the beginning, I will just delete in case there's anything nasty happening in that area. So let's try it.
Welcome to the podcast. A clean house is a happy house.
Okay, so I'm into my welcome spot. Now, after the welcome spot, I have designed the ad coming in. And in my welcome spot, I talk about what we're going to be talking about for this podcast episode. We're going to be talking about household items you can use to clean around the house that work wonders, that spark joy for Abraham, Kelly, and myself. I'll also mention in my welcome spot that we're going to be interviewing a few guests. We're going to be interviewing Kelly and Abraham from the Podcast for Beginners workshop series. So we'll get to all that. Then we'll have the advertisement strategically come in. And I could scoot my advertisement up to come in closer to where the welcome spot ends. And with this tool up here, it's called the trimmer tool. I could also trim the ends of the audio files. So I'll just trim that. I'll trim this out, and then I'll get my hand tool and scoot this a little closer. Now we can see how I transition from the welcome to the ad. Let's take a listen.
Shortly, advertisement disclaimer. Are you concerned about droughts? Do you have worries of water conservation?
Okay, so I have that in place. Then I could go to, after this, I have my interview happening. So I have labeled for Kelly. I have Kelly's interview spot right here. And we'll come in with Kelly's segment, and I'll move her to right after my advertisement. And one thing that Kelly did that was so cool was she intentionally added in parts for us to edit out. So at the beginning, she has this like singing or a whistle that you'll hear. Now, again, the pitch is off, so it's not going to sound exact to what Kelly recorded. But when I change my session here, we should be right back and you'll be hearing the final version of what Kelly's saying. But in the very beginning, just look at the waveform, how it looks different than what speech looks like. It's sustained, it's very, it's very tall. So I'm gonna bring the volume down on that and we'll take a listen to what Kelly's doing. So it almost sounds like some sort of like noise generator signal or just like a tone. But you're not going to want that for your podcast listeners to hear. So I'm going to trim all of that out and then bring her vocal close to the end of the advertisement. So we'll go ahead and give this a play now.
Hey everyone, my name's Kelly here. And I don't know about you, but household chores and cleaning.
One thing I noticed here is Kelly's email alert goes off. So I'm just going to highlight that, take it out, and move the waveform closer together. And we'll take a listen.
Let's just say I don't get too excited about any of that. But when time comes to do a little cleaning around the house, or maybe I've spilled something because...
So what I would do from here is I'd keep listening to her audio to make sure there's, it's as good as we can get it with editing, right? I think in here, there's another part, I'll show it to you in the final session where Kelly intentionally jumbled her words with the cleaning product that she was talking about. So I did my best hack job she said the word almost backwards. So I did my best hack job to kind of rearrange the word. And all I did for that was I went into the waveform, basically highlighted the part I didn't want, deleted it, and then found another instance of her saying the word, and I copied and pasted it into the clip. And I was able to almost seamlessly have that taken care of. I'll try to show you that when we open up the final session. So after Kelly's interview, the next thing I'm going to work on is Abraham's portion. And here's Abraham's vocal, so I'll scoot him over. I'll solo Abraham so we can hear what he's saying. Abraham gave me a near perfect performance. I don't think I had to do anything with his. I think in the very beginning there was some, and you can kind of see it right here in the waveform, there is some audio that's happening that I was able to trim out. So let's see if we can listen to it. So it sounds like he was like maybe grabbing his phone or grabbing something. So I just basically trim that out, and then I move it closer to where Kelly says goodbye. And in Abraham's session, in his interview, he was talking about toilet bowl cleaner. So I had a cool sound effect that sounded like you were scrubbing the toilet with the toilet bowl cleaner. So what I did was I put my sound effect underneath Abraham, and the clip for the sound effect is right here. All I did was drag it to a tasteful area where I could add in this sound effect clip to kind of enhance what he's saying. And I bring the volume down on the sound effect. Now let's see what he's saying here. See if I can drop one in. Oh, that's Kelly still. Excuse me. Here's Abraham. Okay, let's find.
Squirt a bit of the product into the bowl.
So he says, squirt a bit of the product into the bowl, and then he says...
And scrub it with a toilet bowl brush.
And scrub it with a toilet bowl brush. So I thought, hey, let's throw that scrubbing sound into there to see if we can kind of make it a little more exciting. We are talking about toilets. So let's bring the audio down and see what we get.
And scrub it with a toilet bowl brush.
So I don't know if y'all heard that. I can bring that up a little louder, but...
Bowl brush.
So it sounds like, you're like scrubbing the toilet or whatnot. And I did a sound effect for Kelly's. I think I gave her a different sound, but I tried to find a sound on Zap Splat that complemented what Kelly was talking about. Hers was a nice cleaning cloth, a Swedish dish cloth was what she was showcasing. So I tried to find something to enhance hers. And then here's my interview spot where I'm talking about Cascade Platinum. It's a dishwashing detergent. It's fantastic for cleaning your dishes. And before I announced Cascade Platinum, I wanted to have this drum roll, right? So I'm leaving the listener in suspense. I'm vaguely talking about this product. Before I reveal what it is, I have this drum roll that comes in. So I have a sound effect for a drum roll up here at the top, which I believe is this. And I'm going to drag it down underneath my portion. And I'm just going to move it. I'm just going to move the sound effect and place it where I'm talking about the drum roll. So let's see if I can find that.
I have a Samsung. Nope, I take that back.
Oh, sorry. That's rain. Okay, hold on.
An automatic dishwasher. And for the longest time, liquid detergents we'd get from a store like generated. But we were always disappointed, which wasn't a hassle. It was just until we saw a commercial. I think our smart TV's listening to us complaining about the dishwasher detergent. Cascade for drum roll.
Okay, so here I say
for drum roll.
I say drum roll, and let me find the drum roll sound effect. And I'm just going to put a marker right here. Pro Tools is great. You can add markers as like placeholders. So I typed in drum roll, and I know I could just drop my drum roll right there. So one of these is the drum roll. That's it right there. It's this sound effect. So I'm just going to grab it, bring it down, turn the drum roll on, and then it's in the very beginning of the session. So I'm going to move it to my marker line, which is right here, and see if I could kind of line it up. All right, so I'll bring the volume down to the drum roll. Let's hear it.
For detergent we have.
There's my drum roll.
We saw a commercial.
Okay.
For drum roll.
And what I could do is if the drum roll is too long, I could just trim it down and move it, kind of shorten it and put it in place and see how it sounds.
For drum roll. Cascade Platinum.
Okay, so from there I have some sound effects placed. Now this one right here, this sound effect is for rain, and it's intended for the advertisement, because in my advertisement I talk about an out-of-the-box approach to washing your car. I make the case for water conservation. You should wash your car in the rain. You don't have to use your garden hose. You're not taking any water. You're conserving water. And if you're using environmentally clean soap, hey, you got it all right there, you know. The harder it rains, the cleaner your car gets. So I wanted some rain as a sound effect in the background. And then from there, basically, I went into my call to action, which was try some of these cleaning products out around the house. See if they work for you. If you don't like them, it wasn't much of an investment. If you do like them, you know, kind of pay it forward, let someone else know about the products. And at the very end, I have a song. I have one last song that I close out the session with. This was a song that I put together with Elemental Beats, and it's only a snippet of the song. It wasn't my intention to play, 3 minutes of song, just a little snippet to kind of add some energy to the end of the podcast. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to open up the session that I finished and see if I can show you all some more of the edits that I did. And hopefully the sound will sound normal. Okay, skip all. All right, so let's see if we can play some of that. And give me a thumbs up once I start playing if you can hear it.
Hey y'all, I'm David and I'm your host. We got a fun segment for you today. Like clean dishes? Hate pre-washing dishes? Stay tuned. Also,
So one neat thing I did with the music in the very beginning is I used automation. Underneath where it says waveform, I have a volume automation tool. And this tool lets me increase or decrease the sound of the song. So as I'm talking, I've lowered the volume of the song. But when there's a gap between me talking from the intro to the welcome spot, with automation, I turned the volume back up of the song. So let's play a little portion of that.
From Elemental Beats.
So it's loud, and then it drops down for the welcome spot.
Scream clean when I use them at home.
And I thought it was neat to play the music in the background, kind of soft and faint, just to kind of keep it exciting. One thing I did in this session was I went to Purple Planet, the jingle website. We dropped it in the chat, and I downloaded a song they have called Sunbeam. It's an instrumental, and I threw it behind my ad where I'm talking about water conservation. And I also threw it underneath Kelly, the beginning of Kelly's segment, to add some energy there. Not that she needed it, but I just thought it was kind of a tasteful thing to do. So let's play the tail end of my ad into Kelly's segment with the Sunbeam song playing in the background. And the song's very low. Here we go.
And hope you all have a great time washing your car in the rain.
Hey everyone, my name's Kelly here, and I don't know about you, but household chores and cleaning, let's just say I don't get too excited about any of that. But
one of the cool things about Kelly and Abraham's recordings is I believe they recorded, I could be wrong, but I think Kelly recorded hers with Apple Memos, and maybe Abraham did too, but correct me in chat if I'm wrong, Kelly and Abraham. But I thought using what they have, they got a pretty good sound. Now this area right here is where Kelly kind of stumbled on the word, so I just went in to kind of re-edit it.
for a Swedish dishcloth, basically a sweet.
So she had like a correctly said instance of Swedish dishcloth back here, and I kind of copied it and just pasted it in here to kind of correct what she was saying. And Kelly didn't ask me to do that. Just as an editor, I thought, hey, let's do that. Let's kind of make this as professional sounding as possible, because for our podcast, the end goal was, share it with you all, maybe put it on Spotify or whatnot. And I have a sound effect for Kelly right here. So she's talking about the Swedish dishcloth, and I drop in, I think it's the scrubbing sound effect. And I also use automation to pan the scrubbing. So I have the scrubbing starting out the left side of the speaker, moving to the right side. You can kind of see my automation lanes here showing that I'm doing some panning. So let's play that.
Household cleaning tool that really helps me out. I use them in the kitchen. I use them in the bathroom. I use them.
So you kind of heard the kind of brushing of cleaning in the kitchen and bathroom. Now with Abraham, I also thought it was cool to have some background music playing behind him. So I just took the Sunbeam song, copied it over. So let's play some of Abraham's.
My name is Abraham, and today I am going to talk about one of my favorite cleaning products. I live in San Jose, and one thing people here know is just how hard the water is. White buildup shows up in the sink, in the shower, and so on.
So I thought the background music was kind of fun, especially for a short podcast. Now, if this was a really long lecture or something important, depending on the theme, you may not want to use background music, but I really thought it was super fun. Here's Abraham's his sound effect.
And
so it's scrubbing the toilet bowl again.
Squirt a bit of the product into the bowl and scrub it with a toilet bowl brush.
So, and I added a cool echo to it. I'll show you how the echo works in a sec, but the tail end, if I just solo this, let's make sure echo's soloed. So I have this cool echo plugin here that I've opened up, and I can set the echo to notes, right? So that it's gonna echo, I have it echoing to an 8th note and a 16th note delay. So I'm just gonna play the echo by itself, and towards the end, you should hear the kind of echo repeating. You can kind of hear it kind of decaying out. If I wanted to make it a lot louder, I'm using automation for this echo. I could bring my automation lane up to like, I don't know, plus 10 dB. You'll hear a lot of echo. Let's listen to that. So kind of fun. Another thing I added for all my vocals is a little bit of reverb. And reverb makes you sound like it can make you sound like you're in a large room or whatnot. So in Pro Tools, on the Pro Tools channel, in the inserts area, you have the option to open up your plugin. So I went to reverb and I opened up Deverb. Deverb is a free reverb you get with Pro Tools. It's absolutely fantastic. So this is Deverb. I have it set to a church setting. Sound like you're in a cathedral, a large church. So what you do is you make the reverb on a track and you send it into the track that's desired for reverb. And I have this fader knob that lets me dictate how much reverb I'm adding to the track. So for my intro, I just have a little tiny bit of reverb playing.
Hey y'all, I'm David, and I'm your host.
You almost can't hear it, but when I turn reverb up all the way to the max, it's going to sound pretty interesting. So reverb's up all the way.
Hey y'all, I'm David, and I'm your host. We got a fun segment for you today.
So obviously for my needs, way too much. But if you're like in a dungeon or something like that, you know, it's like a medieval podcast you got going on, turn that reverb up, please. I'm just going to bring it back down. It was like at 46. Now, there's different settings in Deverb. I could have a plate style reverb or a hall style reverb or a bit like a room reverb. So I get to choose. So this is where like the creative kind of mind comes into play. What kind of setting do you want yourself to be in? So reverb's great for that. Now on my tracks, I did use equalization. For my vocal tracks, I thought my vocal was lacking low end, bass. So in this equalizer, I have the audible spectrum, the human hearing, 20 hertz to 20 kilohertz available to me. And on that spectrum, I could boost low end. So I'm boosting 83 hertz. That is bass, right? I'm boosting the bass of my voice. So let me turn off the equalizer and I'll turn it back on. You can hear what's going on.
Hey y'all, I'm David, and I'm...
So hey y'all, I'm David. We'll just play that without the equalizer.
Hey y'all, I'm David, and I'm your host.
Hey y'all, I'm David and I'm your host. Now let's turn the equalizer on.
Hey y'all, I'm David, and I'm your host.
So it's just kind of tasteful, but it did help overall give some body to my vocal. And I did that for everyone. For Kelly's, I might have used a different setting. Let's go to Kelly's. Kelly's equalizer, I gave her some low end bass, and I also gave her a little bit of treble enhancement at 9,000 kilohertz. So let's go ahead and play hers. Let me solo hers.
Basically, a Swedish dishcloth, as the
So that was Kelly without it. I'll turn it on. It's very subtle, but I think it helps.
basically a Swedish dishcloth, as they.
Now, what I could do to make it sound real extreme is let's just crank the bass on Kelly's voice. Let's turn this gain from 7 dBs all the way up to 18. This should make a big difference.
Cloth, basically a Swedish dishcloth, as the internet and the world likes to call them. They're a type of.
So there's definitely a boost happening in that low end. I'm hearing it with headphones on, so if you're on speakers, it might be a little harder to hear, but it made a difference. Another thing I added for each of the vocals is a vocal compressor. So the compressor basically tames the high ends of the peaks and the valleys. That's represented in the waveform. Let's see if I can find one for you here. So looking at this waveform, just this right here, let's zoom in. You can see how this word is a lot taller than that word. And it was my goal with the compressor to kind of bring these back together, make them a little more in unison. So in the compressor in Pro Tools, there's these great vocal presets, and there's one called vocal compressor. So I've used that and I've applied it.
Something I'm very.
So let's listen to her say very. This is without the compressor.
Something I'm very.
So the very jumps out at you. It's kind of loud, but with the compressor, when I turn it on, it's going to tame that very just a little bit.
Something I'm very.
And I could really crank down on that very if I want by adjusting the threshold of the compressor. If I turn it all the way down,
Something I'm very.
I really lose it. Just by how much compression is happening there. It took me a long time to kind of understand compression. I feel like I'm still a novice user of compression. There's great YouTube videos on compression. Now, after I'm trying to think if there's anything else neat that I added. After I finished everything, and you'll be able to listen to this podcast episode when we emailed the files. What I did was, in Pro Tools, with my selector tool, I selected where the podcast ends. So I have this outro music happening here. Let's play it.
Tuning into A Clean House is a Happy House. I'm your host, David, and we will catch you next time.
So as the song starts to fade out here at the end, so it's just dying down. What I did was I made a selection with my selector tool from the very end to the very beginning. And what I did was I told Pro Tools export this audio for me now. I'm ready to make an MP3 version of it. So all I do to do that is I go to File, Bounce to Disk file. And if you use Pro Tools first, you have this feature, Bounce to Disk. And then I tell Pro Tools, I want an MP3 version of this. Give me an MP3. The format you want interleaved. Interleaved equates to stereo audio. So make it interleaved, and then I can name the file. So I would name it something like A Clean House is a Happy House. Then I could choose where I want this file to save. I can save it on my desktop, and I'll hit open. And then all I have to do now is hit bounce, and it's going to render. It might take a couple of minutes to render this, but it'll render the podcast audio. So that is kind of me trying to describe to you how I mix this in a nutshell. Again, this comes with time, and this does not have to be your forte. This may absolutely be your forte and your cup of tea, but that's something you kind of learn with time. It's very fun. If you do have a team working on your podcast, you might notice some strengths of your team members or even with yourself when it comes to mixing that really kind of, might put you in the driver's seat to mix your podcasts. With audio, it's not very difficult, especially podcasts, because most of what's playing is just an audio file. You're not having a million different instruments playing at once, like, a song. You're just having an audio file playing with maybe some background music playing underneath it. Maybe two things happening at once. Not too hard to do if you ask me. There's great YouTube tutorials. We do have with lynda.com, you have access, I think it's now called LinkedIn Learning. If you have a library card with San Mateo County Libraries, you can watch plenty of tutorials on mixing audio in like Pro Tools or different DAW. Or you can watch you can watch tutorials on podcasting. A great resource is Pat Flynn. He has a YouTube channel for mixing podcasts in Audacity. That's going to be in our reference notes for the PowerPoint slides. But just look online, how to mix a podcast in Pro Tools, how to mix a podcast in Audacity or GarageBand. Start there. Keep up with us in email. And if we could, point you any tips, we absolutely will. Another thing I forgot to mention, which I should have been mentioning every 5 minutes, is while you're editing, save. Pro Tools does not save automatically. It does do backups every couple minutes, but I would say save all the time. So I just go to File, Save. I learned the keyboard shortcut to saving, Command S. I'm saving frequently. From here, I'll close out my session and we'll save. And that's kind of in a nutshell, mixing digitally your podcast. And it was a lot of fun. I actually had a lot of fun doing that. So I think with that being said, let's open up to see what we have next. Homework. So before we get to Q&A, we're going to just briefly talk about homework. Let me share my screen here. Thumbs up if you can see the PowerPoint. Okay, looks like great. Okay, so let's see. Okay, homework. Oh, so here's the homework. It's all optional, but you stand to benefit if you do partake. So again, we're going to be emailing you all these audio files that I was just working with. Homework is, if you haven't downloaded a free DAW yet, download one. Download Audacity. If you have a Mac, use GarageBand. If you like Pro Tools, download Pro Tools first. Edit the podcast files we give you. So take the podcast files you get in email. There'll be a download link that lets you download all 13 or 14 files and drop them into your DAW and try it out. You don't have to finish it. Just putting them into a DAW might be a huge step in the right direction for you. See what you can do. See if you can organize them. Structure them kind of how we structure them. The intro, the welcome spot, the advertisement, the Kelly's interview audio, Abraham's interview audio, mine, the outro. Place the songs where you think they should go. Use the sound effects. Download new sound effects from Zapsplat or from Purple Planet. Find different music. Add your own segment to it. Record audio for this. Maybe you're a guest in this as well. Add parts to it. Play around. That's how you're going to get to learning. I'm going to get off my soapbox now and turn it over for Q&A.